Alright, so the next lecture we're going to have in our introductory biology series is again moving on with biological molecules, and we're looking at the next class of important biological molecules, which are lipids. So lipids are things like fats and oils, and they also make up things like steroid hormones. So we're going to look at some of their chemical structures, be able to identify the chemical structures, and then we're going to look at some of their biological functions and be able to name some of their biological functions and describe what if their chemistry allows them to carry out these functions. So essentially lipids are the nonpolar and hydrophobic macromolecules that we get inside living cells, and because of that they have a lot of important purposes structurally, for energy storage, and as hormones. Their structural roles and their role as hormones comes in a great deal from their hydrophobic nonpolar nature, whereas their role in energy storage comes from more their energetic chemistry, their ability to be oxidized, and their highly reduced state. So lipids first off contain large hydrophobic regions composed of nonpolar hydrocarbons. So for example, we have this molecule here, which is a fatty acid. Now as we can see, we have a long chain here of just carbon with hydrogens bonded to that. So just a hydrocarbon chain, long hydrocarbon chain. At the very end we have what's called a carboxylic acid group here. So that group is actually is polar itself, and so this fatty acid is our first example of what's called an amphiphilic molecule. So it has a hydrophobic region, so this hydrophobic region here, and then it has a hydrophilic. It has also a hydrophilic region, and with fatty acids that is not as much as a concern, but with some of the other lipids we'll be looking at, it's a much larger part of their role in structural and hormones, in their structural roles and hormones. So we'll look at some of their biological functions now. So first off, the first biological function we're going to look at is lipids involved in energy storage. So first off, what we have here is one of the main lipids used in energy storage. It's a key component of animal fats and oils in plants, and it's a triglyceride. A triglyceride is a derivative of the fatty acid we saw before. What we can see here are the acid groups, 1, 2, 3. There's 3 of them, so thus the tri. So there's 3 fatty acids here. So I'll just circle the fatty acids. We have one here, one here, and one here. So that's our 3 fatty acids, making it a triglyceride. You hate it. The last 2 I've drawn using stick notation, which just means there's a carbon on every corner. Double bonds are denoted by a separate line. Every other line is a bond, and anywhere where carbon doesn't have 4 bonds, there's a hydrogen. It's a shorthand notation I've used just to shorten up the writing. These fatty acids in a triglyceride are attached to a glycerol. This is a glycerol molecule here, drawn separately. It looks like this. And this is also an important biological molecule when talking about lipids and comes into play quite a bit. So this is glycerol. So fatty acids, the long chain hydrocarbons are very energy rich. So our body and other organisms metabolize these and oxidize them down to smaller sugar units and use those for energy. So lipids are a very valuable source of energy storage. The second role we're going to look at lipids in is their structural role. So here we see another very amphiphilic molecule called a phospholipid. Now a phospholipid, sorry, I've made a mistake. That shouldn't be there. That should be a hydrogen. So a phospholipid is like a diglyceride, so it only has two fatty acids here and here. And attached to the glycerol instead of the third fatty acid is what's called a phosphate group. So it's a phosphorus atom with a negatively charged oxygen, with some oxygens and hydroxyl groups attached, and that group in itself is negatively charged. So because it's negatively charged, it's highly hydrophilic. So this is this group, hydrophilic, and these groups are still hydrophobic. So we can see that there's a very hydrophilic group as well as a very hydrophobic group, both in the same molecule. And this gives phospholipids a very strong role structurally. If I can slip this in here. So if we just take this for a second to take this notation as a phospholipid, what we have here, the round thing, is this hydrophilic head, so the phosphate group head. And these lines coming off the back are the fatty acid tails, yeah? So when you put them into water, the hydrophilic phosphate head will love to be around water. It will form strong ion dipole ion bond interactions with the water, as water is polar. And so what we get is the water out here. This is all water, being very close and energetically being favored to be in contact with the phosphorus heads here, etc. However, the fatty acid tails, which are hydrophobic, they are energetically favored to be out of contact with water, so they gather together on the inside. And so if you have just a few of these molecules, they'll gather in these sort of ring arrangements, more like spherical arrangements in 3D, but in 2D sort of a ring, where the phosphorus heads phosphate heads will be on the outside in contact with the water, and the hydrophobic fatty acids of the lipid will be on the inside. Whereas if you have a lot of these molecules, you get a similarly efficient arrangement by forming what's called a bilayer, which is here, and where you get the phosphate heads on each side. So there's water on this side, water on this side. The phosphate heads face outwards, and their fatty acid tails are oriented inwards, and that gives us the ability to make a membrane. And this is the structure behind cell membranes, which we'll revisit in the lectures on cell structure. But that is essentially how they act as very important structural molecules, creating the membranes which bound cells and bound cell organelles and segregate the external aqueous environment from the internal aqueous environment. So the final role we're going to look at steroids playing a role in is as hormones. So steroids have important roles as hormones. They form many important hormones, especially classes known as steroid hormones. So a lot of people heard of steroid hormones in a bad light because of their misuse in sporting activities and for muscle building. But steroid hormones are a crucial class of metabolic hormones that control everything from digestion to growth, as we've seen with athletes, and our stress response. So they're an incredibly diverse class of hormones, and one of the important precursors to steroid hormones is the lipid cholesterol, which has group there. And cholesterol has also got some attention in the media for its other roles in cardiovascular disease, but it is an important precursor chemical to these steroid hormones, and actually also plays an important role in cell membranes. So we can see a lot of these lipids, fats, they are essential and are used to create a diverse range of things from energy storage, cell membranes, structural role, and even to hormones which control the functioning of other cells. Alright, next video will be on nucleotides and DNA and RNA.